We are glad to see you again on our channel. And today we have a review of a movie where John Carter accidentally hits Mars, where there is a confrontation between two cities and the whole planet is at stake. He holds in his hands his return home, as well as the fate of the princess and the fate of the planet Mars. The film begins with the planet Mars, a red planet with no air or life. But in reality, Mars is Pubsuma. There is air and life on the planet, but Pubsuma dies. The city of Zodanga is to blame. Another city, Helium, dared to repel Zodanga, who defended himself for thousands of years, but all changed when the ruler of Zodang, Sabthan, was caught in a sandstorm. 3 servants of the goddess descend from the sky and say that Sabthan is her chosen one. They give him weapons and say, "Follow our commandments and become the ruler of Pabsum. There will be no defiant ones." Sabthan. New York, 1881. A man in a hat comes to the post office and sends a letter by courier delivery. He names the sender, John Carter. Another man receives a letter and reads it, sitting on the train. "Dear Ned, come to me urgently, John Carter." Edgar Rice Burroughs, aka Ned, gets off the train and is greeted by Carter's butler, reporting that Carter has lost his life. Edgar arrives at his uncle's house and is met by an attorney. He tells Edgar that John Carter was perfectly healthy, full of strength, and suddenly fell dead. The attorney also says that John was always working on the development. Edgar says that his mother always claimed that John's soul never returned from the war, only his body came to the West. He says he'd like to say goodbye. A solicitor takes him to a tomb that only opens from within, as Carter ordered. The attorney reads out a will that states that John Carter bequeathed his administration for 25 years to his beloved nephew Edgar, and at the end of the term, the capital should pass to him completely. Edgar asks why he, as they have not seen each other for so long. The attorney replies that John did not go into the explanation, and he did not ask. Edgar also receives John's personal diary with the words that maybe there he will find some explanation. The attorney goes away, leaving Edgar alone. Edgar opens the diary and starts reading. On the very first page is a letter addressed to Edgar, in which John begins his story. Edgar Rice Burroughs, Fort Grand Outpost, 1868. John Carter enters a pub for a spider bait. He is told that he is a psycho and will not be sold anything. John starts talking about a cave with gold, but the man pulls him out and says he no longer wants to listen to it. He says, "There will be no credit. John Carter." The men at the table laugh and then go to John and tell him to get out. He says he will leave when the bags are full. He points a gun at the bartender and gives him a bar of gold, saying that he has found it and that he will cover all his expenses in excess. Then he puts a piece of paper on the counter, a list, and he says the list starts with beans. 3 men enter the pub, one of whom is Colonel Powell, and says that John is asked to come to the foundation and that he should do so voluntarily. John lashes out at him. In the next scene, a bucket of water is poured on John. The colonel says that he was not easy to find and reads his call sign list. John attacks him and stabs him in the nose. The next scene is a colonel with a broken nose who continues to read the list. John runs out the window. He is thrown into a cell. The colonel says that John can and should help the fatherland in the fight against the Apaches. John replies that he has already paid his debt in full. John also says that he will escape this cell, take his gold, and become wildly rich. He also says he's gonna buy the colonel's ass and kick it all day. The colonel punches John in the stomach and says he does not believe that in his notes and in front of him now is the same person. He advises John to come to his senses and accept the offer. John wakes up and starts peeing through the bars. The guard runs up to him and says that he gave him a bucket. John grabs him and hits the bars, takes the keys, and escapes from the cell. The colonel is told that he stole his horse. The officers sit on the horses and pursue John. John stops abruptly in the middle of the field. John is confronted by another gang of Apaches. John talks to them and tells the colonel not to shoot, but one of the officers has already fired. The colonel is wounded. John takes him on his horse, and they run away from the Apaches, hiding in a cave. The Apaches see them, but look at the cave and leave. John goes inside and sees gold there. Suddenly, a man appears behind him and swings at John with a knife. Between them, there is a clash. John shoots a man. He almost loses his life, but says some word. John leans over, holds on to the blue medallion in his hand, and repeats the word. John is on Mars. He notices that he cannot walk normally, but he can jump high, due to different bone density and low gravity of the planet. He finds eggs with some animals and wonders where he is. He is approached by Green Martian Tarkus, led by Tars Tarkus. John does not understand their language, but meets them and calls himself John Carter of Virginia. Jedak thinks his name is Virginia. He asks John to jump. John jumps and grabs the Jedak's weapon. Another of the Tarmac shoots him. He and the cubs are placed together. Tars Tarkus. Deja Thoris rehearses a speech in which she says that Barsoom is doomed because the new ruler threatens to destroy helium. The doors open and her father comes in, Tardos. The girl starts talking, but he interrupts her. Tardos says he knows what Sabthan wants, but he wants to know if they can say no. The Admiral replies that the enemy has breached the line of defense. The areas will be destroyed. The last of the squadrons was defeated. Tardos says he has failed everyone, and the city is doomed. Deja says that this is not the case and shows her invention, where the blue color is the same as on the Sabthan weapon. She says that as soon as she read the report of the enemy weapon, she realized that he had first opened the 9th ray, inexhaustible energy. She says that Sabthan uses it for killing, but that energy can be used for good purposes, transforming the desert, the sea line, etc. Deja. The girl turns on the machine to show it in action, but something burns out in it. Tardos asks everyone to leave. He tells his daughter that Sabthan is willing to spare the city if she becomes his wife. Deja rips out his father's hand and says that the enemy is a monster. They start arguing. Her father says that Sabthan is already flying here. The girl is indignant that he must find another way out, and is told that there is no other way out. Jedak is told that Sabthan has arrived. He commands to begin preparations for the wedding. Tardos. At this time, John and the young are brought to the rest of the Tarkus. They begin to grab the young, and John gives the Tarka named Sola. The ruler of the Tarks reveals John and says that this rare animal is Virginia. He asks him to jump, but John refuses and stands stubbornly. The ruler says that John will undergo the rite with the young. Sola gives John something to drink, called the Voice of Barsoom. At night, John breaks out of his chains and sees the Vula baby like a dog. He chases after him, gets to the Tarks at the meeting, and deprives the life of one of them with a blow of his hand. The ruler asks how he did it. John is surprised to understand their speech. John and Sola are chained and punished. Sola is branded hot on the body and said that there is no more space. Her next offense will be the last. The ruler asks John to jump, but the Tarks are distracted by the approaching ship. The ruler explains to John that the cities are at war. Deja escapes, hijacks the ship, but almost falls from it, and John rescues her. Sabthan calls her ship. John and Deja begin to defend together. John fights Sabthan and he retreats. The Tarks put a sign on John and say he fights for them. John talks to Deja and reveals that in his homeland ships do not fly through the sky, but float on the seas and rivers. The girl is angry and says that there are no seas on their planet. Then together they call all the planets, and John realizes that he is on Mars. He, along with Deja and Sola, with the dog Vula, go to the Temple of the Tarks and see the drawings on the walls, where the goddess's ministers are drawn and the move is down the river. Sola. John agrees with Deja that she will get him the medallion and he will save her. At this time, they are found by Therese and taken to the cage. Tars Tarkus tells John that Sola will die because of him. John guesses that she is the daughter of a Tark. Tars Tarkas tells the other Tarkas that he will handle himself and goes to the tent. There he tells John that he frees him and the girl on the condition that they take Sola with them to the river. Other Tarks enter an empty tent and realize that Tars Tarkas betrayed them. John, Deja, and Sola go to the sacred river. Sabthan at this time doubts about the wedding if he already wins. Sola tells John that they are going the wrong way. He asks Deja, and she admits that she is a princess and does not want to marry Sabthan. Soon they reach the river, get into the boat, and start swimming with the current. They reach the cave, and John with Deja go inside. There they find the 9th ray, the schematics. The girl says she needs more information to understand everything, and for that, she needs to go to Helium, the center of science. Deja says that she feels John, even though they are from different planets. She says she sees a man ready to fight for the right thing. They kiss. A minute later, they hear sounds and emerge from the cave, attacked by the War-Hun race, Shang commanding them. John recalls saying goodbye to his wife and son when he went to war, and when he returned, they were not alive. He remains on his own, telling the girls to leave. Here comes the ship of Deja's father, together with him and Sabthan. He says that he cares about the safety of the girl and makes Deja gift a blade. Deja reveals that he saved her life. Shang. Deja and John are brought to the Zodanga. Deja has lost faith in the future and agrees to marry Sabthan. She gives John instructions on how to use the medallion properly so that he can return home, but John decides to stay. John is captured by Shang. He tells John about the purpose of the Tars and that they manipulate different civilizations to create their demise and then feed on the planet's resources. They want to do the same with Barsoom. That's why Sabthan was chosen to rule. John, along with Sola, comes to the Tarks and asks for their help. However, on arrival, they see that Tars Tarkas is no longer the ruler. It has been overthrown. Now, the ruler is Tal Hajus. He goes with John to the arena. John with a wounded Tars Tarkas fight in the arena against 2 huge white apes. John manages to kill Tal Hajus, and he becomes the leader of the Tarks. At this time, the father leads Deja to the altar, begins the wedding of her and Sabthan. Tarki, led by John, attack Helium. John shouts that it is a trap, and at the wedding there are warriors of Zodanga. The chaos and battle of the cities begins. John's army defeats Zodanga. Sabthan dies. Shang escapes. John marries Deja and becomes Prince of Helium. On the first night together, John decides to stay on Mars forever with his wife and throws away the medallion. Shang appears and challenges him. He sends John to the Earth. John goes on a long journey on the Earth. He finds the signs of the Terre in search of the medallion. A few years later, he allegedly suddenly loses his life and asks for an unusual funeral. In fact, John found the medallion. He's going to Mars, but his body won't be in a coma on Earth, so he asks his nephew to guard him. After reading the diary, Edgar runs to his uncle's tomb and uses clues to open it. As soon as this happens, a Turn appears nearby and aims at him. However, John shoots him and takes his life. He explains that he faked death because he did not actually find the medallion, but came up with a scheme to lure out the Turn and win the Shang challenge. John thanks his nephew and says goodbye. John uses the medallion of the slain Turn and returns to Mars. This is an American film by Disney John Carter in the genres of fiction, action, adventure, directed by Andrew Stanton.